All right, my beloved Madridistas, welcome back to Madrid. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, we have a little bit of downtime now that there's no sort of football going on, and I thought I would take the time, well, two things. First of all, to thank all of you for your support. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. And then secondly, I thought I would address some questions, very, very common questions that I get in the comments section that we normally don't sort of have time to get around to. But sort of, I want to talk about sort of the things that you guys ask me all the time, like, how does the Socio structure work at Real Madrid? How does it actually function? How do you get seats? Everyone's always asking, how the hell do you get tickets? How does somebody even become a Socio or a Socio Abonado? We'll talk about that. But I also get, other questions because at the end of the day, we vote for the president. So I get asked a lot, what do you think of Florentino Perez as a president? What's your view? And then other questions like, who my favorite players are historically for Real Madrid and sort of in general. And then, what's happening with the noise issues at the stadium, just a variety of questions that you guys ask me. And I think that now we have a little bit of downtime, we can address some of these. But thanks for joining me. As always, let's talk about some of these really interesting issues that you guys bring up in the comment section. Thanks for joining me, and let's get started. Fellow Madridistas, welcome back. Okay, but the first thing that I need to do is just to say thank you to all of you, because I'm still, blown away. Just the fact that you guys take the time to listen and to contribute and your comments and all that, I'm incredibly grateful. This is so much fun for me, and I'm just really, really grateful to each and every one of you, and I want you guys to know that. Okay, let me address some of the questions that you guys bring up a lot in the comment section, and I'm sort of in a unique position to discuss it, as a socio of the club, and I kind of want to tell you guys about that. So in terms of, we'll start with the sort of structure in general. So, look, most of the clubs in Spain are owned. So, usually privately. I mean, they're not listed in the stock market or anything like that. Some clubs in Italy and the UK are, but most of the clubs in Spain are owned privately by private individuals or companies. But there are three clubs: Athletic de Bilbao, Barça, and Real Madrid, that are still socio owned. Now, what does this actually mean? So basically, what it means that from a legal standpoint, you're set up kind of as a non-profit organization. So it's kind of like, like an endowment or a non-profit where you have a sort of board of directors and you have a president. But none of the revenues that are collected from the club go anywhere other than to the club itself. So there is no owner per se to which to distribute a dividend or part of the profits or anything like that. So it is, one of the great advantages of the socio type structure is that every single penny that the club generates goes back into the club. So there's no need to sort of repay. Obviously, if there's a loan, you have to pay, interest on the loan, but there are no investors that we need to take care of. We don't have to pay out dividends. We don't have to pay out a share of profits. It allows you to reinvest every single penny that the club collects into the sporting performance of the club, which is why Real Madrid always has sort of state-of-the-art everything, and we're kind of at the cutting edge of all this stuff. And if you go to Valdebebas, it's absolutely extraordinary, the resources and the facilities that are there. So it's basically, the socios vote for the president, and now there's sort of, kind of delegate socios that, because they don't have socios vote on every single issue, but socios are involved in sort of major issues, like, for example, the election of the president. So we're called upon to do that. Now, Florentino Perez has sort of been in and out of power for so many years. He did change the system in a few ways. So, and some people, do criticize some of the changes that Florentino has made over the years. So, for example, to become president of Real Madrid now, you have to be able to personally guarantee 10% of the club's revenues. Now, at today's exchange rate, we're talking about something like, what the club generates $1.1 billion of revenue. So you would have to be able to guarantee $110 million personally. Now, obviously, that's not something that most people can do, and you are allowed to sort of get other people to sort of guarantee you, and then you guarantee. But obviously, it is an impediment. So if anybody wants to become president, it's not a very easy thing to do. There are a few hurdles that you have to get past. But in theory, this is how it works. You have socios that vote for the president. He then puts together a board of directors, but it's run like a nonprofit. Now, Florentino Perez is thinking about changing the structure of the club going forward. It's something I have mentioned before, and he wants to do something that kind of looks like Bayern Munich a little bit. So, what people are sort of talking about these days is that socios would end up owning 51%, sort of one particular share class that would be 51% ownership and always in control because they would always have a majority, and then 49% of a different type of share class that could be traded freely in the secondary market. Now, that's one possibility, that you take the 49% and list it in the stock market, or you get strategic partners that are with you for a long time. So you can give 10%, maybe you sell it to, I don't know, BMW or, a big firm or a Google or someone, and they kind of become strategic partners and sponsors going forward. That's another way of doing it. But one of the advantages of switching the model to sort of a Bayern Munich type model would be that having two share classes and having one of the share classes actively trade allows you to market the value of the institution. So right now, if someone says, well, what is Real Madrid worth? Well, you really don't know. You have to look at comparable operations and look at peers and sort of peer valuations. But if you actually have a share class that is actively trading in the secondary market, then you have an instant up-to-date valuation for the firm. And what that does is allows you to have access to capital much more easily than if you were just sort of run the way things are run now. So Real Madrid has great relationships with different banks, so financing has never been a problem, but it does make it easier as an institution in terms of financing if there is a mark-to-market, a daily, instant, by-the-minute valuation of what the club is worth. And that is something that Florentino is sort of moving to. But right now, it is a socio-run club, and we vote for the president, and we vote him in or vote him out, and that's sort of how it works. But the great advantage, like a nonprofit, is that all of the money that goes in principle, is supposed to be dedicated exclusively to the activities and operations of the institution, and we don't have the burden. I mean, if you look at what's happening to Man United, they have to spend so much money repaying the Glazers because they bought the club with debt, and that is really the kiss of death. So that's something that I know Real Madrid wants to avoid at all costs. If we want strategic partners, we want them to be strategic corporate partners, or we want to list a share class in the secondary market and have it listed, and people can buy and sell shares freely whenever they want. But that is sort of how the socio model works. And like I say, it applies to Barça, Athletic de Bilbao, and Real Madrid. I think it's only those three at the moment. Okay, then the big issue that everyone is constantly asking me about is the whole seat issue. Like, how do you get tickets? People write to me, they're like, I'm coming to Madrid, how do I get tickets? Look, it is a very thorny and complicated issue because at the moment, about 85 to 90% of all the seats in the Bernabéu are owned by socios. So myself, my family, and you are, as long as you pay the annual fee, which, by the way, is not particularly high, but as long as you pay your annual fee, it cannot be taken away from you. So when the way that this works, and because it's kind of a complicated process, in order to own a seat at the Bernabéu, you first have to become a socio. So you cannot own a seat if you're not a socio. And once you own it, as long as you pay your fee, it cannot be taken away from you. It's kind of like, and when you go to the offices to do this, it's kind of like buying a house. I mean, you need 2 forms of ID, you need a witness, everything has to be notarized. It is a really, really big deal. And it's taken very, very seriously. But in order to own a seat, which is called an abono means that you have the seat for life as long as you pay the annual fee. In order to have an abono, you have to become a socio. Now, I was fortunate enough that, decades ago, I was able to make myself and my family socios, and we were able to go about the process of getting seats. The problem now is that it's very, very difficult to become a socio now. I mean, and that is the starting point if you want seats. So the first thing you have to do is become a socio, but to become a socio now, you have to be sponsored by an existing socio, and I think it has to be a direct relative, and the process can take up to 3 years. So that was not the case historically. There was a period where you could become a socio of Real Madrid relatively easily. I'm talking about 30 years ago. Then about 20, 25 years ago, they changed it so that there were only 2 days a year when somebody could apply to become a socio. So they started to narrow the window because they had so much demand and they realized that it could become problematic to have too many socios. They narrowed the window. So there was a point where there were only 2 days a year, and you had to literally wait for those 2 days for them to open the window where you could become a socio. Now, once you are a socio, then you are legally able to own a seat. So at that point, you can try to convince another abonado to sell you their seat or give you their seat or transfer their seat to you. So the first thing you need to do is to become a socio, and then the second thing you need to do is to somehow convince someone else, another socio abonado, to transfer their seat to you. And in the moment that that happens, you both have to show up in the offices. Like I say, 2 forms of ID, a notary public. Like it's a really big deal, and you have to sign a bunch of papers. So the process has become very, very difficult. Now this means that, technically speaking, there's only 10 to 15% of tickets available for the general public for matches. Now that is sort of on paper, that's technically the case. But what happens in a lot of cases is if you're a socio abonado and you're not going to go to a match, and let's say you don't have friends in town or anyone to give them to, you can give the seat back to the club for that particular match. So you go online. Every socio has their own kind of socio portal. You go online. You allow the club to issue a paper ticket for the match that you're not going to be able to attend. And then they collect the money and they give you 1/3 of the money, 35% of the money, which accrues for the fee that you have to pay the following year. So if I don't attend a lot of matches and I let the club issue a ticket for the matches that I've missed, I start to accrue a credit. And then by the time I have to pay my fee next year, it's not going to be as high. You would have chipped away at it, and it kind of makes the whole thing a little bit more economical. But for those of you that sort of write to me and say, look, I'm coming to Madrid, how to get tickets? Look, there are a lot of socio abonados that don't attend matches the way I just described, and those tickets are given back to the club. So the club, for pretty much most matches, unless you get to really big sort of quarterfinals, semifinals of the Champions League or the Clásico or whatever, those are tougher matches to get tickets for because most of the abonados will attend that match. I mean, I know a lot of socios that they'll go to a handful of matches during the course of the year, but the vast majority of them, they'll just give it back to the club, and the club will resell it in the form of a paper ticket for the general public. So there are many, many seats available through the club for individual matches. So the first place I would look would be, go to the Real Madrid website, see if you can get a ticket there. If those are gone, then you have to lean on things like StubHub and sort of Ticketmaster and stuff like that. And in those cases, those are in those situations, you have socios abonados who are basically giving their card to another person for that one particular match. You're not supposed to do it. The club doesn't like people reselling their tickets or monetizing them in any way, so you're not really supposed to. However, you are allowed to invite whoever you want. So if I'm if I'm here and I want to invite someone from out of town, there's no problem at all. You're allowed to invite anyone you want. What the club doesn't want you doing is sort of reselling them kind of in the black market. That's something the club doesn't like. But the short answer is that becoming a socio abonado now is a lot more difficult than it was back in the day, sort of 30, 40 years ago. It is a lot harder to do now. I got asked a question over dinner with some friends a couple of weeks ago. They're like, well, if a billionaire showed up in Madrid and said, I want to become a socio abonado, could a billionaire do that? And the answer is no. The answer is no. You can make a private arrangement with someone and say, which you're not supposed to, but you can do it. You can say, look, let me have one of your seats for the entire season and I'll pay you whatever. That's something that people, I'm sure they do on the side quite regularly. But in terms of actually becoming a socio abonado and being the owner of the seat for life, that is something that is very, very hard to do now, and like I say, you have to become a socio first. And then once you're a socio, you have to go on the waiting list to get a seat through the club, which is like 80 years or something ridiculous, unless you can find and convince another socio abonado to transfer their seat to you. So, there are a lot of interesting ways of motivating people. And I had to go through that process about 25 years ago. It wasn't easy. It's a crazy story that I won't bore you with on this occasion, but it is a very difficult thing to do. I had literally thousands of people telling me to F off. People get very offended. I mean, if you're a socio of Real Madrid and you ask a socio abonado, will you transfer your seat to me? I mean, the amount of, these people get very offended because this is kind of like it's a family heirloom. It's like it's something that they consider a very valuable part of their family, their legacy. People do not give these things up easily. And people get very offended, even if you just ask the question. And I can tell you that about 25 years ago, I was called everything under the sun. People were just so offended by just the suggestion that they transfer their seat to me. So it was a long process, but like I say, it is a very complicated issue. So if you're coming to Madrid, try the Real Madrid website first. If not, you're going to have to do the sort of StubHub Ticketmaster thing, or try to get in touch with with a socio abonado here in Madrid that can spare a seat. But it is problematic. It's not easy at all. So I do understand a lot of the frustration out there. Okay, now another natural question for a socio like myself is, what do you think of Florentino Perez? And I get this question a lot. And I think, look, there is the broad answer is that I think he's amazing. Okay, like if we zoom out, there are things that I disagree with him, absolutely, and there are a lot of things that he's doing now that I think, I think there's been a lot of mismanagement this last couple of years, and there are a lot of things I disagree with. For example, the European Super League, that was a proposal that I actually did a couple of videos on this. Both the original proposal and the second proposal I thought were awful. Okay, they were just not really based on meritocracy. They protected big clubs way too much, and I was completely against that. Then he put together a second iteration of the proposal, and I did a video about this, and it was still far too close and far too elitist for my liking. So there are issues where, look, I understand his grievances with UEFA, and I do understand that UEFA has a monopoly that they don't deserve. But I think that if we're going to propose an alternative, it has to look different to what Florentino proposed. So there are things that Florentino has done that I don't agree with, okay? And recently, there's a lot to discuss. I mean, the whole discussion of whether or not we needed to bring Kylian instead of bringing another central defender, which we're now absolutely lacking and in desperate need of. There are a lot of issues that I have with the current management team and some of the mistakes that have been made. But if we zoom out and if we're fair in our kind of more comprehensive analysis, I would say that Florentino Perez has been absolutely amazing, and he's been a blessing for this club because if you think about presidents prior to Florentino Perez, there was a lot of shady stuff going on. There were other presidents that were accused of, shady type stuff and bribes and like commingling, assets of the institution with their personal. There was a lot of dodgy stuff going on, but Florentino Perez put an end to that. He absolutely professionalized the club at every level. And as a socio, you interact a lot with the club. They have a socio office that, socio services, and you go and they help you with whatever issue you have. I mean, everything is run very, very professionally, and everything has been modernized. So I think that, on the whole, and what he's done for the club commercially in terms of leveraging the brand, leveraging the club commercially speaking. I think he's done that unbelievably well, and he's sort of, reinstilled the values of Real Madrid. I mean, he's very serious about the sort of values of the club, and I think he's done a very good job at that level. So I think my personal opinion is that he's been a blessing. We're very, very fortunate to have had him and not someone else that would be sort of, prone to sort of sketchy stuff. And we see it in other clubs. I don't need to mention which one, but you do see it in other clubs. And I'm very happy to say that, Florentino Perez is a self-made billionaire. And I can tell you guys that becoming a self-made billionaire in Spain is not an easy thing to do. The United States, for example, is very geared towards creating vast wealth. I mean, tax legislation, labor legislation, employment legislation, it's all designed to create, massive empires. Spanish law is not like that, okay? Spanish tax law and employment laws protect workers a lot. The tax rates are much higher. It is very hard to do what Florentino Perez has done in his private life as an entrepreneur, but it does give you a glimpse into how brilliant this man is. I really think he's an extraordinary businessman, incredibly bright, and I think has done wonders for the club, despite a lot of the issues that we have today that can be attributed to Florentino, because a lot of the mistakes that we've made that put us in the position that we're in today, he is responsible for, and José Ángel Sánchez and Yuni Carafat. So I do blame them for a lot of the issues that we have now. But from a bigger perspective, if you look at the totality of his contribution, I think it's been really, really positive. Okay, now another thing that I get asked a lot is sort of, who are my favorite players? Who do I think are the best players ever, not just for Real Madrid, but in general? And this is a really interesting discussion. And I put out a video a week or two ago about Messi, saying that I don't think he's the GOAT. But I just don't think that the term GOAT should be used in football. I think that the term GOAT is something that works very well with American sports because there's a lot of math involved, in the baseball, things like that. There are a lot of isolated moments that you can compute them. It's the iteration of the same event many, many times over. And so you can use math to sort of, observe things. But football is different. Football is totally continuous. It's a constant motion. So it's like, instead of millions of small events, it's one very, very long event. But it's all kind of interconnected. So I just think it's very, very difficult to use the term GOAT. And part of the reason that I made the Messi video was not so much a critique on Messi. I have nothing against Messi, and I think he's an awesome player. But a lot of his sort of entourage and the propaganda machine around him started to use the term GOAT, and that really pissed me off because I just don't think it's a term that should be applied to this particular sport, because you have different trophies that have different weights. People come from different countries. Some of them have the option of winning the World Cup. Some distinctly do not. So there's so many factors that come into play. So when I'm asked my favorite players, I base it entirely on technique. So if you grow up playing the sport, which I did, I lived in a lot of different places, but wherever I lived, we played football. It was just, we played, since I could walk. And so if you've played the sport, even recreationally, you are aware of the difficulty level of some of the things that these players do. And I'm an absolute snob when it comes to technique. I'm an absolute snob when it comes to things like dribbling or your first touch, the way that you control a long pass with your first touch, the accuracy of your passes, the weight of a pass. Do you make the player slow down or speed up to get to that ball? Or does it go perfectly into his stride? Like, those are the type of things that I notice that I'm really, really picky on. Is a player totally dependent on one foot, or is he ambidextrous? Things like this. Is he good in the air? Like, I like to look at the totality technically of a player. And so to answer the question, finally, my favorite players of all time are Zidane, Ronaldo Nazario, and Cristiano. Those are my three sort of favorite players of all time, and probably Maradona as well. But the reason that is the case is that I just think that, Zidane, there was something very unique about the way he played, and I was fortunate enough to watch him, play live, in the Bernabéu every single match. And it's just if you ask ChatGPT or if you asked AI to build the perfect player, it would look a hell of a lot like Zidane, because Zidane he was technically perfect. I mean, there was something about his balance, the way that he turned, that he could spin in either direction. He was good with both feet. That incredible goal that he scored in the Champions League final, that volley, which is incredibly difficult to do. If you've ever tried to volley a ball that is falling from the sky in a straight line, it's really, really hard to catch that perfectly. It's nearly, if you try it 100 times in practice, you'll catch one of them well. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. But Zidane had he made everything look so easy. His first touch was the best I've ever seen. His ability to just use the motion of his body, he could, without even touching the ball, he could get players to fall over. He just had an extraordinary balance. He was good in the air. He was good with both feet. And he had an elegance and a poetry in the way he played that was just, I had never seen anything like it. So Zizou is sort of my favorite. I like Ronaldo Nazario a lot as well because, again, the technique is unbelievable. So he started playing football sala. So Ronaldo Nazario didn't start on the big pitch. He started playing football sala. Now, when you play in small, contained, confined spaces like indoor soccer, it's sort of 5v5 type thing, and with a smaller ball, you become very good at dribbling because you're in very small spaces. And then later, as he went on, he graduated to the bigger pitches. But what that meant is that you ended up with a player that was incredibly powerful and strong and had just an incredible, power when he was sprinting, but he was also unbelievably technical in terms of dribbling. I mean, he was one of some of the dribbles that Ronaldo Nazario did, I had never seen before and I've never seen since. I mean, he was just absolutely marvelous. And then, of course, Cristiano, what can you say? I mean, he was just the best thing that ever happened to Real Madrid in a long time. And then, of course, Maradona, I thought, probably had the singular best foot. If you could amputate one foot in the history of football, to put in a museum, I would amputate Maradona's left foot and put it at the Louvre right next to the Mona Lisa. I think Maradona had the most incredible foot I've ever seen. The things that Maradona could do with that left foot, I don't think any other player has been able to do. But anyway, that's my view on sort of players, and I do get that a lot in the comment section, so I wanted to explain that. Another issue that I want to talk about is the whole noise thing. People ask me about this too. There was a lawsuit now that we have concerts in the Bernabéu and we have the hard, we can put the grass under the stadium. And then you put a sort of hard surface, and you can play other sports and have concerts. Well, a bunch of neighbors filed a lawsuit against Real Madrid saying that it was too loud. Look, that process is still ongoing. The club has invested really heavily in noise reduction technology that they're putting all around the stadium. I get the feeling that, look, I live close enough that you can hear it. I mean, when Taylor Swift was here, on my balcony, you could hear her, you could hear the concert. So it's not something that is intrusive enough to bother me indoors, but you can kind of hear it when you're on the balcony. It doesn't bother me at all, but some of the neighbors that are a little bit closer have complained and sort of filed a lawsuit. So Real Madrid is kind of addressing that issue. They're investing very heavily in a solution, but I get the feeling that a lot of these neighbors are only in it for the money. They're trying to squeeze some sort of agreement out of Real Madrid, and I get the feeling that some of these guys are, don't have the best of intentions. So I think this will eventually get resolved with the use of technology and maybe some sort of compensation payment to some of the neighbors. But I do think it's something that the club will overcome and will be able to continue to monetize the incredible stadium that we have built here, because it's absolutely incredible from a technology standpoint. It's an amazing place. But anyway, those are some of the issues that I wanted to talk to you guys about, because I get them a lot in the comment section. I thought this would be a good time to chat to you guys about it, because there's nothing going on. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Ask me more questions if you want. But thank you guys again so much for all of your support. I absolutely love, I'm so happy I set this channel up. I'm having so much fun with it, but it would make no sense without you guys. So for every single one of you that participates and sends comments and stuff, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay, I'll leave it there, you guys. Anything else you want to discuss, mention in the comment section. I'll see you guys in the next video. Love you guys, and as always, a la Madrid.